Welcome to the latest edition of Here and Now. This is Steve Struggle, along with Dr. Abraheim. Abraheim, how you doing?
Recovering. I'm a bit slow today, but
You know, it takes time to recovery takes time.
yeah, yeah. Okay, there's some nasty stuff out there in terms of the available infections from whatever. We
Yeah,
have a transportation system here in Montreal Nord, which is mostly Haitian workers, and the bus number 49, every time it's packed full of people. People are going to work, and they're still sick. They still have to go to work, and so everybody gets sick. And so, you develop your immunization, uh, with anticorps, they're called in French. I forget what they are called in English. The particular white blood cells, that fight off infections, and the body, is very efficient at doing so. But the medical health system does not bother to collect these antibodies and pass them on to other people who need them from people who have already been infected and who have developed the cure. They just ignore all that. Not in China. No. In China, they have a beautiful machine that filters a, a patient's blood, a recovered patient's blood, into the machine that harvests the antibodies, sends the red blood cells, back to the patient, keeps the antibodies, for another patient who is very ill and who will recover with the necessary antibodies because they're not particular to any type of blood type. They're general. Yeah, but the medical system just ignores that because it's too costly. It's easier to go for a pill and pay some Pfizer company, $27 an injection. That supposedly solves the problem. Only the trans RNA, that they were using to make those vaccines are not exactly a vaccine. They're sort of more of an inhibitor, a blocker against the viral infection, and they don't, actually use the body's antibodies, to kill the virus. And so the virus, will survive, deterred, suppressed, survive, and evolve to create a new virus that is stronger than the vaccine that was just used to try to stop it. It's antibodies that are really the cure for these infections. But the medical system here is not capable of coping with it because they're drained of funds. They're trying to squeeze it into the private sector. Oh, like we can go on. Nonetheless, there are bigger problems. So the so-called ceasefire or hudna that has stopped the bombing of Iran, and together with that, the bombing of Israel. Now, what is the first point of interest here is that this week, when Israel did not want to stop bombing Beirut, even though the other bombings had been stopped. It was not receiving any missiles anymore from Iran. So it figured it had, like free reign. Oh yeah. Like they figured that they had won the war, they could do whatever they want, and nobody's going to tell them what to do. And they're just going to sneak around the back of this agreement and go and bomb Beirut. And then, you know, Trump is worried about the Strait of Hormuz being closed again. So he calls up Netanyahu and tells him, stop that nonsense there. You're going beyond, like what is possible. As he puts it, you don't have the cards, kid. So, you know, uh, check out. And and he did, even before, there's a vote in the Israeli Security Cabinet. So I know, like this seems obvious to me, and I think it's obvious to everyone that you know, Israel does not control the United States of America. So that,
exactly, exactly, exactly.
like
Yep, yeah. that should end that conversation once and for all.
Yeah.
So like the myth that Netanyahu was dead or something. Well, that myth is dead now, right? He's clearly alive.
Yeah.
Or you get a really good AI impersonator. So yeah, but the thing about yeah, it was really Trump said it no uncertain terms there would be no more bombing of Lebanon, and that doesn't mean anything. He said it, but he did write it, and so far, Netanyahu has carried out his boss's orders.
Oh yeah, 100%, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
They're still
I mean,
occupying the south, of course, and they have bombed a couple of places, but they have argued it's not a violation of ceasefire because they were defending themselves from attacks. Whatever, you know, but they're minor sort of things. You know, they have stopped the bombing of Beirut. They've stopped the bombing of Hezbollah. Okay, so, you know, they're not in the position of power. Israel is not, you know, controlling the United States of America. Israel does not control um, world capitalism, whatever, you know, other sort of, you know, arguments, you know, that Tucker Carlson is using. And Marsheimer as well, you know, he's the one who fostered, you know, uh, the hyper sort of uh, exaggeration of what the Israel lobby is in the United States of America. You know, but Marsheimer is a darling of the left. He gets interviewed on all these shows, and Tucker Carlson is now a hero of the anti-war movement. Oh, he came over to our side, and now he's against the war. No, no, he's not on our side. You know, like this is all nonsense and is very depressing. Yeah,
where's this coming from that Tucker Carlson is on our side? Who in the world is saying this? The guys are he's MAGA, man. Come on now.
well, you know, there's these so-called leftists, actually, rad lefts, uh, rad liberals, sort of fake left, who are even invite, you know, show, you know, Tucker Carlson's, you know, podcasts in their emissions without criticism. Okay. And then they also repeat, you know, the same refrain. Oh, yes, this is a war for Israel, like the officer who got torn out of a meeting, you know, shouting, you know, why we will not fight for Israel. Well, it's not for Israel that the United States is fighting. The United States is not going to fight for any other country but itself. That's obvious. But the left, you know, fell for that game. It's very sad. And it's very dangerous too, because, you know, this mass populist anti-war sentiment can be turned around. I'll explain later. But historically, what does something like this mean? You know, when there's a revolutionary working class student movement developing, what happens is that the, you know, the bourgeoisie, that is the ones in power, you know, what's called one percenters, they will try to manipulate and not oppose the movement because they cannot oppose the movement. They will try to manipulate the movement by taking it over. Okay. Can they do that? Yes. For instance, in Italy, Mussolini started as a leader in the working class socialist movement, which is ignored most times by, you know, the leftists, you know, who want to pretend that they are pure white, you know, uh, loving, peace-loving individuals. Okay, yeah, good luck. And then the other example is, you know, the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany. You know, where did they get that name from? Huh? They got it from the left, right? Those are leftist words. And they took over the working class. Working class was quite happy to believe in their lies. And they gave them a whole bunch of lies, you know, to believe, and they were quite willing to do so. And they got promoted. And that was it, you know, the end of the revolutionary movement. in both of those countries. This is very serious. Tucker Carlson really, like is just using all of this, to foster an anti-Jewish sentiment, as if, the Jewish people, who are 1.5% of the American population, have the control over the corridors of power. On the other hand, if we look at actually who occupies the corridors of power, who's the one who was pushing the military to go through with the Isfahan strike to try to steal the uranium, enriched uranium there at Isfahan? It was Hegseth. Now that failed, and they covered it up and claimed that it was a big victory, to rescue the pilot. It wasn't even a pilot, it was a gunner. and and they just covered up, the failure to take the uranium by force, which is still threatening to do. Trump is. Well, like Hegseth is a guy I should have, pulled search for a photo of him, and his tattoos to show you all. This guy is a Christian evangelical, starts off as a Catholic, but he doesn't even follow Catholic, the virtues of Catholicism, like the Pope is trying to do. And Cornel West, refers to this. And this guy, like is the darling of the Protestant, rather, Christian evangelical movement, which is, hyper-Zionist. And they want, Israel to take over the Middle East, to foreshadow the return of their God, who they call Jesus Christ, which is Christ is, of course, just a Greek pagan name for demigod. And the Greeks, they loved their gods. They had a lot of them, and Christ was one of them. And Christianity was taken up by the Roman Empire as a state ideology to justify its imperial ambitions, because they were out to do good for the world, as Christians. Oh yeah. So that's the way it is. Hegseth is in there. He's got the power. And when he makes a mistake and it goes too far, then J.D. Vance steps in, as the peacemaker and goes to, meet up, with the Iranians. And it's none of that. Yeah, well, like anything he says, is irrelevant. So Hegseth is still there. Now the Secretary of War. On what? War on the world. By the Christian power base. Now, has anybody written a book about the Christian lobby in the United States of America? I don't think so. Has anybody written about Christian Zionism and its control over American foreign policy? I haven't heard about that. I haven't heard any leftists mention that either. Why? Because leftists are very sort of simple-minded here, and they rely upon a simple formal logic. I'm going on, like on and on here. Steve, like, how does it look to you? I'd like to find out, what you sort of see in all of this.
Oh,
Oh, you're still on mute. You double tapped.
thank you, sir. I have heard that I have seen writings by one leftist academic or organizer, if you want to call it, Baba Bakian. He has written something about the Christian fundamentalists and the Christian fascists, but the left demonizes him. They hate him because he say you're a cult. You're a cult leader and you're an old white man. He's one of the few people in the United States
What?
who has written about this.
They call him an old white man?
Yeah,
And they
yeah.
dismiss him because he's an old white man.
It's, it's amazing when you want to see how sick and how low American culture can get. They'll take somebody's race and age and use it against them. It should be something to celebrate that you're older and you have something to share, whether it be right or wrong, and
Yeah.
take his color of skin and attack him. Anyway, you're right. Very few people have written about this. I think maybe Parenti has done something, and maybe Chris Hedges has done. I mean, there are very few who've
Yeah.
looked at the fundamentalists, the Christian Zionists, and how they who they really are and what they represent. But this guy Hegseth, let's talk about him for a minute. You
Yeah.
know, this guy Hegseth, there's currently an impeachment movement against him. He
Yeah.
might get thrown on. He might get thrown on under the bus. We'll wait and see, because I know JD Vance and those guys don't like him. I mean, in the sense of there are divisions within the cabinet of the government. We'll see. But what's concerned me the last week is I don't know how to say this without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and I don't want to do that. But is anybody legitimately in mainstream America opposing this war?
Yeah.
I mean, so much destruction is being done to Iran. It's not like Gaza, no, but for no reason. This was a war of aggression by the United States against Iran. Period.
Mm.
If you want to deal, and there was no, you had the joint cooperating partnership agreement (JCPOA), which, well, okay, I'm not going to go on that,
Mm.
which monitored Iran's nuclear program, which I think Iran shouldn't do, but that's their country, and that's what they are choosing to do. Okay. So, because North Korea would not allow it, for example, and neither would Russia. But that's how Iran does its business, and that's Iran's business. Okay? So Iran had a JCPOA.
Mm.
It was working fine.
Mm.
Trump tore up the JCPOA.
Mm.
Trump opposed it, not Iran.
Mm.
So the historical the historical facts are never up to debate or discussion in the United States. No, they're not. It's
Mm.
like the narrative is what carries the conversation, not the historical facts.
Yeah.
And I'm more than a little concerned about this, because if the negotiations don't start again and they start bombing again, it's just when Trump said he was going to destroy civilization, I didn't see enough people concerned about that. That should concern you. Your president is saying he's going to destroy a country. That should concern you. It would concern me. And
Yeah.
nobody said it too much in my lifetime. I wasn't around when they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But that's what that was about too. To show the Russians we have a nuclear weapon, and to say to the Japanese, watch, we think so little of you, we're gonna wipe your civilians out and basically get away with it. And they did.
Mm.
So if there's anything that I'm concerned about, I want people listening here to consider. When you hear a government official or a corporate leader or somebody, an editorial writer say we should wipe something out,
Mm.
and in the sense of something that is not harming anyone, something that has a right to live. Because in my view, I'm gonna say it again. In some respects, this is a civilizational war. The United States civilization, and that's what they want to have, a civilization versus the Iranian civilization. And I'm for the Iranian civilization's right to exist. Why?
Yeah.
Why not? Why not? I mean, there's no reason why it doesn't have a right to exist. So I know that's not the way people think. That's not the thinking. But there's a book. There's a book out. I encourage everyone to read, Columbus and Other Cannibals. And that's what changed my view on the situation. I still have a historical materialist, revolutionary, and nationalist perspective. I still have that. I still have that. But it helped me see another aspect of the domination of of nations by nations, the issue of civilizations and conquest. The United States wants to conquer. They started off beginning of the year conquering Venezuela, and they did conquer Venezuela. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Like it or not, it happened. You took
Yeah.
the leader and put him in a jail in your country. That's conquest, baby. Yes, it is. 101. I'm gonna get your leader, and do I want your leader? So I've conquered you. The U.S. Embassy is open. They have new laws for how the Venezuelan oil industry works. It was conquered. I hate to admit it, but it did happen. And it's not a vassal state now, but it is under the control of the United States in basically. So now they're trying to do the same thing to Iran. Iran's saying, no, you're not going to conquer us. And they don't like that. They don't like that. But people in the United States are going to have to get a better sense of what's really going on here, because your emperor, the Emperor Trump, will not allow this to look like he's lost, because he has to go on a conquering spree. Mm-hmm. So he showed, right, he showed you and me, Israel doesn't run me. Watch this. Yo, Israel, you drop another bomb. You drop another bomb, it's gonna be your last bomb you drop. Has Israel dropped the bomb on Lebanon? Absolutely not, because they know who's in charge. This is what people were saying a long time ago. If the United States wanted to end something, they tell Israel what to do, and they do it. This is exactly what happened, right? Right. Yeah. That's what happened. They said, that's what everybody said. They want to stop Israel from bombing Gaza. All they had to say is, you don't drop another bomb on Gaza, and the Gaza destruction would have stopped right then and there. So the United States wanted Gaza to be destroyed. Yes, they did. What proof do you need? They told Israel to stop bombing Lebanon, and it stopped. Yeah. Period. It's over for right now. Yeah. So people in the U.S., activists, humanitarians, progressives, wherever you are, this is a war. Another aspect of this war is a war of civilizational conquest or domination. And Iran is not giving up too easy, is it? No, they're not. No, they're not. They're taking some blows. They're taking some blows they shouldn't even have to take. But they haven't capitulated. They haven't given up, and you haven't defeated them yet. So you may have met your match right now. You've met a match. Venezuela was not a match. Iran is a match right now. They're fighting they're attacking your embassies. They're attacking your military bases and Israel at the same time. That's pretty freaking good. I haven't seen that in my lifetime. They're attacking two fronts. They have an anti-Israeli front and an anti-U.S. front at the same time. Yeah. And two countries are attacking it. Two armies, and they're still standing. Come on, man. You gotta give the boys some props on that one. Come on.
With two nuclear weapons as well. No intimidation possible. Iran is strong. Yeah. The people are demonstrating every evening. Yeah.
You gotta give them some props, because the average country, let's say in the Balkans, I don't know, Vietnam, I don't know what they have right now, but I'm the same countries I'm looking at who United States wants to do business with Vietnam, so don't worry about that. There's no other countries right now, maybe Yemen, who else? DPRK. I'm not talking about Russia and China. I'm not talking about those countries. The ones that don't have the nuke program really kind of like, really, really, really strong. But the DPRK has nukes. The United States leaves them alone. Right now, they leave them alone. They're not messing with them, are they? Nope.
No.
They leave them alone. So Iran's taking on two fronts. They haven't fallen yet. I don't think they will fall. I think the United States doesn't really know what to do, especially since the Strait of Hormuz is now, they close it again. They close it again. They don't know what's going on. Oh my God, it's closed again. Damn, they don't know all these damn Iranians, And now you're starting to see positive images of Iran on Instagram, videos about the Iranian culture, the Iranian architecture, the Iranian schools, the Iranian, factories, the Iranian civilization. This is good counter propaganda. This is good. Yeah. Because the United States only wants to show Iranian, this bloodthirsty, anti-woman. Oh man, shut up with that nonsense. You're bloodthirsty. You taste blood every day for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and for dessert. Get
Yeah,
out of here. That's it for
yeah,
me. Sorry. That's my rant about that situation. I
yeah.
can't stand it.
Oh, well, but Gaza is not mentioned in all of this. That's unfortunate. It has to come into this because the ceasefire in Gaza is not being respected by Israel. So Iran has to take up that cause. But the problem is, Iran is not allied with Hamas. The Hamas government of Gaza, the
Yeah.
Hamas government of Gaza is allied with Qatar, which is an ally of the United States of America,
Well, that's
attacking
that's not
Iran, you
that's
know?
not that's not a good alliance. That isn't
And
a good
why?
alliance.
Yeah.
That's not a good alliance. No, it isn't. That's not a good
And why
alliance.
why is Hamas dependent upon Qatar? Because they finance Hamas to pay for the employees of these, public function, okay, healthcare system, etc. And they get what is it, $300 million a year? And then Israel holds off the payments. They don't give them, payments, when they want to try to coerce them into doing something or other. It's Gaza, that's the beginning of this whole conflict. That's everything depends upon Gaza. Now, in Israel, okay, the theory of might is right. Here, like as I explained previously, if you're operating on the basis of might is right, and if you win, that means you're sanctioned by God, whatever God they're talking about. And so if you've won, then might is right, that you've won, because you are right. Okay, now Netanyahu, he didn't win the bombing campaign in Lebanon. He was forced, to stop it completely by his master, imperial master, because the IDF is the imperial death force. Okay, now he stops it. And what happens to the Israeli public, who've been geared up, to fight in this war, to win, at whatever cost, et cetera, et cetera, calling up reserves, 300,000 reserves, trying to force the Orthodox into the military. And, and, and the Orthodox, they don't go into the military, despite, the stereotype made of, the IDF, and Zionists as being ultra-Orthodox Jewish warmongers. This is a false image. There are a few, like who pretend to be Orthodox in the military or amongst the settlers, but the great majority of the Orthodox, they do not go into the military conscription, and they demonstrate against conscription, and they do civil disobedience against conscription. Okay, so to get back to to Netanyahu, so his like argument that his might is right, and he has been able to get the United States to come in to doing Israel's work for it, like he's boasting about his own prowess. All of a sudden he gets like demoted by Trump, to virtually nothing, and he has to comply. So what happens to the Israeli public? He's supposed to be this great big war hero. That's how he's built his, power base. They dropped him. He's plummeted in public opinion polls because he hasn't been able to fulfill, his imperial ambitions there. And if he's, lying to the public, about what his power is, then why should the public, support him? Now, there's many others who are wanting to come in to replace him, with the same, like objective in order to capture that public opinion. But it's been cracked open. And once the the king has fallen off the wall, there's no number of the king's men who can put him back together again. He's done. In French, it's il quit. He's fried. He's finished. And I'm very glad to look forward to the upcoming elections there in Israel. It's going to be chaos.
Thank you
Now,
for that. Thank you for that analysis of the Netanyahu rise and beginning demise. Because no, again, that has not been even talked about.
don't
Wow,
want
you're
to.
exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, we'll talk about that. And the populist left doesn't want to talk about that either because the war has been divided into the good and the evil. That's how simplistic the populist left is thinking. There's the good Iranians, the good Palestinians, and the evil Israelis, who are genocidal people who need to be either, who knows what. They all have to be expelled, or they all have to be killed, or or they all have to be bombed, into submission, whatever, no concept of political intervention there. Why can't they sort of, like speak to the Israelis and tell them why they're being misled? No, there's no concept of that whatsoever. The good and the bad. And where does it come from? Christianity. Christianity is good and the Jews are bad. Hmm? That's why we're called Jews, because Jews is a derogatory term. And that's what the Christians have used, especially the Nazi Christians who put it on the yellow star. With the left, and even, the the anti-war Jewish left, if not bend the arc, if not now, Jewish Voice for Peace, they all use the term Jew, even though it's an insult. If someone were to call me a Jew, I'd slap them in the face. It's that much of an insult as far as I'm concerned as a second generation Holocaust survivor. Well, but the Jewish, progressive, so-called progressive left, goes along with it. There is an exception to all of this in the United States, in New York City, and that's Molly Crabapple. Shout out to Molly Crabapple. Thanks for her new book, The History of the Bund. Here, where we live, is our home. You know, Contradicting Zionism, which says, no, you can't live there. Like you're going to be massacred, one day or the other. Therefore, you have to give up on building a free and just society, and you have to run away and hide in the ghetto called Israel, and then fight to kill in order to survive. That's the Zionist logic. But people don't understand where Zionism comes from. It comes from the Holocaust. Before the Holocaust, the Zionists had 8% support amongst the Jewish people of Europe, the Ashkenazim. They had a lot of members, because they had the middle class behind them. So they had 300,000 members. But the Jewish Bund, which was Antifa, had 35,000 members who were all activists. And so were stronger than the Zionist movement, actually, especially in their locales. And the Bolsheviks, of course, were only at 8,500 compared to the Bund's 35,000 or 38,000, actually. So, like, the Christian ideology is not a religion. It is an imperial rationale developed by the Roman Empire. I forget the emperor's name who codified that. But they formally adopted Christianity. Of course, they rewrote the New Testament to their liking. And everybody accepted that, and they said, "Oh yeah, this is Christianity." Now, the original Christians in the Middle East, who actually practice a pure form of Christianity, which I don't have, uh, much to oppose, um, they're not considered to be Christians by the Western Christians, and they get bombed in southern Lebanon. When Israel was bombing, the old ancient churches, some of the original churches in southern Lebanon. Did Trump say anything about that? Did Hegseth say anything about that? No,
Didn't say a word.
no. You know, uh, it's only when the Strait of Hormuz gets closed, that Trump orders Netanyahu to cease and desist. Order stand down, man. Type of thing. Okay, so he does. Now, what Iran is doing in reply, saying, the United States has no justification to call for the opening of the Strait of Hormuz under a ceasefire order if it itself is conducting a blockade against Iranian ports and not allowing Iranian-bound ships, to enter and leave, and they're doing 100% sanctions on Iran, and we're not supposed to receive anything from the rest of the world. Oh yeah. So, Iran says, forget it. This is not a ceasefire, and they've closed the Strait of Hormuz again.
Right, right. This is not, I'm glad you said this is not a ceasefire. This, a ceasefire essentially says all actions by the belligerent parties against each other in any way must not occur. And
Yeah,
putting those, imposing that military blockade against Iran is an act of hostility by one of the belligerents. Therefore, the ceasefire has been broken by the United States. Yes, it has. Again, no one will say that,
yeah,
but it has been broken. Yes, it has. Right there.
yeah,
Thank you. I'm so happy you said that. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. The even Al Jazeera doesn't talk about the U.S. blockade on Iran, which is ongoing. Like Trump, like Israel, they go to an agreement, ceasefire agreement, and then they just continue their military tactics by another means. And they say, "Oh, well, this is not, this is our right." But you just signed a ceasefire. Oh yeah, but it's our right, to continue war anyway. Like okay, like go and pick up the dictionary and look up, like what, you know, a ceasefire means and what neutrality means and what the principle of reciprocity means and all of that stuff, that they don't know what it means in the first place. So, this war is going to continue. And I don't think that Israel can regain the momentum in Lebanon either, because the president of Lebanon has come out now against the occupation of southern Lebanon. The president, not just Hezbollah, the president of Lebanon has come out
Well,
against.
ask your question. Ask your question. Ask your question. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Excuse my language, but what the hell took him so long? You're occupying your own country, dude. I mean,
Yeah,
what's going on here? I mean,
yeah.
this is not. I mean, whether we like the borders or not, well, whatever our view on those issues are, you've been attacking southern Lebanon for the longest.
Uh,
Is the
I can
president
ex I
that
can
far
explain
off?
that to you. Like it's weird. Lebanon didn't come out against the bombing of Lebanon beforehand, and
Yeah, I
they,
mean, it's the bombing of your own country. And what the
yeah.
hell? I mean, what's going on here? I mean, I
Okay.
mean, I don't endorse the Ukrainian narrative, but they can say Russia attacked their country. They can say it. I don't agree with the analysis, but they can say it. And
Yeah.
their war is against that. Their war. I'm not saying I agree with their perspective, but they can say that because it happened, like it or not. There's a border. They can say that. They can say it.
Yeah.
And that's an argument that Russia has to deal with, But you tell
Yeah.
me Lebanon's president has never, you're saying he's never condemned this before? He's never said anything about it? You gotta be kidding me.
No,
Who
no,
is this
no.
guy? Who is this guy?
Hmm. Okay, I'll explain that now. You
Thank you.
know, when the Crusades came into the so-called Middle East, the Western Orient, the Crusaders didn't, capture Jerusalem right away. They were going for Jerusalem, but they couldn't make it. So they would capture other cities like Apello, set up a base, military base, of operations. And these bases of operations were in Lebanon. And the Crusaders installed themselves there. And then they didn't get, very far, further, to occupying Jerusalem at the time. Eventually they did, but they were expelled, by Saladin, who treated them very mercifully and humanely, rather than the way the Crusaders, operated when they did go into Jerusalem and just massacred everyone, both Jewish and Christian and Muslim Oriental occupants of Jerusalem were all massacred, and the refrain is that the blood in Jerusalem ran ankle deep in the streets of Jerusalem with the number of people who were killed. This is Christian liberation. This is what the Crusaders were all about. That they considered that they had a right to dominate the world as a Christian empire, which is called Christendom, as in kingdom. And they go and massacre everybody, but Saladin, he actually liberated the Christians, from Jerusalem, and they were allowed to leave, like with everything that they owned, you know, in order to make, peace. Not revenge, but peace. Revenge is a Christian concept. Actually, I think the psychological basis for the bombings of Japan and Hiroshima and Nagasaki was in part a revenge for the attack on Pearl Harbor, which was an affront, a great affront, to American sovereignty, which had never been attacked before, right? So this was a big shock, psychological shock, which it took, to get the United States into the war because they couldn't care less about the war in Europe, couldn't care less about fascism. They had a nice, healthy fascist movement in the United States of America, to boot. So why should they sort of get involved in a dispute, amongst Americans themselves, in order to uh, support, quote unquote, the Jews? So okay, they didn't until they were forced into the war by the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which Japan, justified for itself because they were under sanctions by the United States of America. So they hadn't declared war in the United States of America, even though they were allies of the Nazi Germany and they were fascists. And the United States was neutral even against Germany. But because of the sanctions, they got attacked and then they entered into the war, et cetera, et cetera. Revenge. You know, Revenge has something that's been adopted by Zionism as well. See, the Zionist logic, which is generated by Christian theology, which finds its traces and origins in the certain aspects of Judaism as written by Ezra the editor, who rewrote the what's called the Old Testament to his own liking and introduced the genocidal concepts, which were not there in the original Mosaic text and contradicted what the prophet Samuel said in the first place against the nomination of a king and wars. Nonetheless, revenge takes place. Why? Because of the Holocaust. Because the Jewish people became disenchanted, with the benevolence of God. And amongst us survivors, the way we think of it, like to one for one way or another, survivors think of God in this way. And I'll tell you, God ignored us, so now we ignore God, and we do whatever we want because morality doesn't exist anymore, because morality is based upon religion. Religion is naive, foolish, and doesn't protect us. Therefore, we must now seek might as security. And might makes right in the world. Okay, so now we will seek might. And since 6 million of our people were killed, we have a right to revenge. We have a right to kill 6 million of you. That's Zionist logic. Who's you? The Arabs. Why the Arabs? Oh, because they're opposing Zionism. Were the
Oh,
Arabs?
yeah. See, that's where it's all wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's take that logic to its conclusion. If you're saying it's an eye for an eye, then you have to kill 6 million Nazis.
No, not just Nazis. The Christians, they allowed it to happen. All the
But
Christians. Like
but
you don't realize how deep this, sentiment goes. It is a very pathological, mentality. It's insane.
yeah, you're
Like,
right about that. You're right about that. It's very pathological. It sure is. Yeah.
yeah, if somebody believes in revenge, sit still and wait for the revenge upon you. You know, there's no joke. That's why Israel develops a nuclear bomb. They're ready to use it against anybody that they want to. They feel that they need to. You know, for any invented, rationale for existential cause. What are they
But,
talking about?
but,
They're
but
talking
the
about a
only
state, not a people. Not talking about the Jewish people, even, not even about the Israeli people. No.
so what you're saying is the modern day adopt adaptation is not against Nazism, but against anybody who is against Zionism.
No, Zionism provides or assumes the rationale of revenge against all non-Jewish people and even against all non-Zionist Jewish people like me.
That's that's awful.
Yeah.
That's awful. Because I mean, even the communist states or social states have agreed that they have to coexist with non-socialist and non-communist states.
Yeah.
It's part of the I wouldn't say modification, but development of the idea. Even though there are some things about peaceful coexistence that I would find kind of, okay, well, you coexist with that. But the point is, they are not at war with anybody who is anti-communist or non-communist. So you're saying that the Zionist movement is a war against all non-Zionists, or
Yeah.
can justify a war. Wow, I didn't know
Well,
that.
even Christian Zionists, I mean, they're conscious of the fact that the Christian Zionists, want to either convert or kill off all the Jews. Hmm? They have to convert to Christianity. If they don't, then they have to be gotten rid of. They know
I
this.
didn't know, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, yeah. This is part of the end of days, scenario. And the Jews are really key to this whole doctrine, because it's the Jews who have to agree to become Christians and loyal to Jesus Christ as the God Savior, or they get killed.
Who
No.
who made this up? Who made this up? I
Ferdinand and
really,
Isabella. This is Ferdinand and Isabella in the Inquisition of 1492. It's come back. Like it's always there. They ordered the Spanish Jewish population to convert to Christianity. And so those, who wanted to, any sort of, middle class promotion, they would convert. But they were always under suspicion. They were there was a name for them called conversos. There's books about this, but the left doesn't read that sort of stuff, okay? So, they converted to Christianity in order to survive. Then, they decided they were going to expel all the Jews anyway. And who were the first Jews that they expelled? The conversos, the ones who converted to Christianity because they were suspect of not being, loyal enough to Christianity because perhaps they lighted, candles on Friday night for Shabbos. They retained, some sort of, ritual that was part of the Judaic tradition. And if you were seen, through a window to be lighting candles on Friday night, they were suspect and they were targeted and eventually they were killed. And so they left. That's why the Jewish population of Spain dispersed throughout the Maghreb and northern Africa. Turkey saved, and the Muslims saved the Jewish people then against the Inquisition of the Christian Catholic Church in 1492. This is not the only time. The Holocaust is just a continuation of these Christian crusades against, the Orientals, which we are. The Jewish people are Orientals. We come from the Orient. And then the left, oh yeah, no, 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 they don't come from the left. You have no right to claim indigenous rights, in Palestine because you're just Europeans who came from Kazakhstan. What bullshit, like it's incredible that what, like the left falls for, in terms of rationales, because they're looking for something quick and easy, to explain the position because they want, to get as much support as possible. Support for what? Support for themselves. They're just out there fishing, for political capital. They're not really out there to stop Zionism, to stop the war. They don't really get to the fundamentals of the question. So that's why they fall for, the good and evil, like paradigm. Oh boy, it gets so much more complicated as well. I could go on about Hamas.
yeah, but
That's
you're right. Hamas Hamas made criticisms of, if I remember correctly, or at least if the news media is accurate in its reporting, which we know it isn't. Hamas made condemnations of Iran's hitting the U.S. military bases in the
yeah,
saying they were attacking Arab countries. The
yeah.
same Hamas, the same position of the Syrian government, by
Mhm.
the way. As I
Well, yeah.
as we reported months ago, well, I think we were first company, the first outfit to report that Syria began the media offensive against Iran, attacking U.S. military bases, coining it as attacking Arab countries.
Hmm. Huh.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And,
Really?
and Hamas agreed with them.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Has its limitations, but they're dependent upon Qatar, for its financing.
Wow,
So
that's
that
interesting.
explains that. But
Huh.
politically, if you want to go into the development of Hamas, okay, it was founded in 1988 by Yassin, who knew nothing about the Jewish people. He was a great patriot and created a resistance movement, which was phenomenal, and it should be credited for that. But they knew nothing about the Jewish people. Now, the rationale used in their charter of 1988 was full of Nazi propaganda. And the Israeli Zionists, when they point this out, they're right. That's what Hamas was. It was part of the Muslim Brotherhood, which was nurtured by Husseini, who was the British appointed uh, clergy of the Palestinians and considered to be the spokesperson for the Palestinian people, appointed by the British. This guy, uh, Husseini, uh, Hussein, yeah, he's the one who became voluntarily a collaborator with Hitler, and he met with Hitler. Now, I've seen the minutes of that meeting, and there was no discussion of extermination. However, each of Hitler and Husseini advocated the extermination of the Jewish people. Husseini, I think, was talking about Palestine. He was calling for the extermination of the Jewish people in Palestine itself to liberate the Palestinian people. That was, a liberation program. Okay. And but the Nazis wanted the extermination of all of the Jewish people everywhere because we were considered to be a alien Oriental force in the Western European and Central European context that had no place being there. And therefore, they had to be expelled because they were building a homogeneous Christian nation state, according to Hegel. Okay. So, uh, but Husseini didn't inspire the Nazis, to call for the extermination of the Jewish people. He had developed this concept on his own, and so likely did Hitler as well. Now, what happened there is that the Nazis, helped Husseini by giving him a radio broadcasting station, shortwave, broadcasting in Arabic into the Middle East that was advocating Nazi propaganda to oppose the the Zionist invasion of the Orient on behalf of the Crusader West. Okay? It sounds good, like to the Arab population there, it makes sense, because that's what they seem to see happening, in a formal sort of logical kind of a way, in a simplistic way. And so Hamas adopts this charter in which they refer to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was a
Oh
czarist
no,
place.
that's no. That's a fake. No, that's nonsense.
Yeah,
That's garbage. Total garbage.
yeah,
Fake. Written by the Russian secret police. Okhrana wrote the document. Yeah.
yeah, right on.
No. Yeah.
So,
No. Yeah.
but that's the only thing they knew about the Jewish people. Like, so they adopted that as a rationale for the national liberation movement of Hamas. But then things start to change, because in terms of experience, Hamas developed on its own. In 2011, I spoke with a Hamas leader in Nablus at the public protests, solidarity with the prisoners' hunger strike at the time, which was a mass hunger strike. Sitting there, like uh, next to the sunscreen, and at the other end of the circle, this guy, like looks at me intently and raises his hand and goes, with his hand motion, come here. I said, oh, he wants me to come under the shade of the sunscreen for my physical betterment. So I move in, like I'm under the shade, and I say thank you. And he says, no, 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 come here. He wanted to speak with me. Okay. Because he heard that I was Jewish. This is Hamas. Okay. So I come over there and, he doesn't know very much English. So we get an interpreter who is a comrade, from the PFLP. She comes in, we start talking, and I start explaining to him, where I come from as a Jewish pundit and as a survivor of the Holocaust and all this. He's listening, doesn't say much. He wants me to continue talking. Then he invites me to his home together with the translator. Okay. So go into his home, doesn't even ask me to take off my shoes. We go and sit down, translating. We were talking for about an hour. And I explained it all to him. That's 2011. 2017, Hamas comes out with a new charter in which the enemy is Zionism and not the Jewish people anymore. Hamas developed. They quit the Muslim Brotherhood beforehand as well. Because of their national liberation movement, they have to be independent and not, part of, subordinate to some sort of theological, authority. Hamas changed. And then October the 7th, nonetheless, the Israelis, they've been only told about, the 1988 charter, not about the 2017 charter. So they think that Hamas are still Nazis. So that's, they're freaking out, about October 7th. They're willing to believe any sort of lie whatsoever. When in fact, to reiterate, the official number, even quoted by the Israel government, is that there was 1,392 or 94 deaths on that day from the Israeli side, not including 2,000 Hamas fighters who were killed. Initially, they said it was 4,000 who were killed by Hamas, and they claimed that it was, Israeli civilians who were killed by Hamas, 4,000. And then said, oh no, we made a mistake, 2,000 when we, they did, DNA research, investigation, identification. They discovered that the charred bodies that they thought were Israeli civilians were actually, the results of, aerial bombardments in which both the Hamas fighters and the Israeli civilians in the kibbutzim were killed. Okay, so 2,000 changed into the 4,000 suddenly changed into 2,000. And then they changed it again, afterwards, after they sort of, have to sort of account for things. And it was 1,394. But, people keep on saying 2,000, civilians. Now, actually, out of the 1,194, 534 were soldiers around Gaza who were the targets initially, because when they broke out, with a few thousand Hamas fighters, they took on, the military surrounding them in the first place, of course. And these are the military who are not innocent. They are the ones, who are fighting on the Great March of Return and shooting into civilians and killed about 534 civilians. And all of a sudden there was 534 military who were killed. Ta-da! Wake up, a wake-up note. Then they went after the hostages. Rapes, there were none, as it should be obvious, because these are disciplined Islamic fighters, and Islam forbids, rape, so they're not going to be raping women, because they're disciplined fighters who are there, to take hostages. So why hostages? Not for money, but to liberate the Palestinian hostages, who now number 9,500, of whom 1,500 are under administrative detention. That is to say, with no legal accusation laid against them. They're detained under martial law because they're political activists and they could do something, that would upset the balance of forces there. Okay. So, Hamas takes the hostages and they get bombed, by the Israeli helicopters while they're taking the hostages, and the hostages get wiped out as well. What's called Hannibalized. The Hannibal doctrine of the Zionist military is, you can kill your own people if it serves the military purposes of the Zionist state, because everybody has to pledge allegiance, with their life to the Zionist state, and they cannot allow themselves to be killed. And if they are to be taken hostage, and if they are taken hostage, then they, must agree preemptively that they will allow the Zionist state to kill them. This is how indoctrinated these people are. A suicidal cult. Uh, so that's, the story of Hamas, which is not known here.
Wow. Well, we
Yeah.
sure have learned a lot. We sure have learned a lot today from you, Dr. Abraham. We appreciate you
I
sharing your
appreciate
knowledge
the
with us.
opportunity to get it out, because, where else can we talk about this?
We
Certainly not.
can. Nowhere
Yeah,
else. Nowhere else. Nowhere else but here. And I
yeah.
want our viewers to share this, to think about what we're sharing with you, because you heard a lot today that you haven't heard before
Yeah.
about Zionism, about Christianity, about the Lebanese
Hamas.
president, about
Yeah.
Hamas. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, there's so much involved here, well, okay. So now the populist, anti-war movement, has come up against the wall of Christianity. And they seem to arrive at a certain sort of, personal justification for participating in the anti-war movement because they want to be on the right side of history, or they want to be on the good side, or they want to be on the side of of uh, of peace and love. This is what Christianity is called, peace and love. But they only mean peace and love, for other Christians. Like so if they're Christians, they're willing to go for it, because they're Christians, so they figure they, can participate in this peace and love thing. But, like it doesn't solve the problems, of Christian crusaders, jumping down, with a headset, they're behind, the microphone telling them, to advance, take it. That's what Trump said, right? Take it, take the oil, telling Europe, go ahead, take the oil. Should be yours. You need it, therefore it's yours. Like that's, the way, Christianity operates. That's very cynical. Yes, but it's true. If the Christians want to make something, like valid out of Christianity, let them go ahead. But what Christianity is right now is not, what they think it is. Even the Catholic Church, with the new Pope, really. Like has the Pope, denounced the Crusades, of previous ages? No.
Um,
Has the Pope denounced, Zionism? No. Has the Pope called for the recognition of a Palestine state? No. Just, like trying to look good, put on a good face, let everybody, come around, to say, thank you very much for your kind words, and your holy words, not just kind words, holy words from the Pope that mean nothing. Hmm? So, oh, it's just too much to bear. Okay. So that's my conclusion. Do you have some words to conclude, our session today?
get up and stand up. Stand up for your rights.
Yeah.
Get up, stand up, and don't give up the fight. No, those are my
Yeah.
words about Marley, and those are my concluding words for today.
Get up, stand up for your rights. Yeah,
That's
man.
right.
Yeah. Good, man. Okay.